Last week Roly and I were studying a text that we are going to be teaching from the Svat Emet, and on the notion of Kodvenu L'chaim, that we should be inscribed, written in the book of life. And of course, when we think of the image of the book of life, the kind of childish orientation in it is that God is sitting up in the heavens with a big book and a pen. But of course, that's not a very satisfying image or answer to what these days mean. And the Svat Emet has a very beautiful teaching that says, Ki b'chol ish Yisrael yesh nekuda kedosha b'libo, v'hu nishmat chayim, shene'emar v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. There is a holy point in each person's heart. He says, this is the nishmat chayim, the living soul of a person. And you may have recognized those words where it says, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu, which is the second bracha of an aliyah, that God has planted eternal life into us. And he says over the course of the year, we lose that point in ourselves through sins, through all the feelings that we have, and it gets covered up. And what it means to Kodvenu L'chaim, to be written, inscribed in the book of life, is that life is that nikuda kedosha, that holy point, is put back in our hearts again by God. That's what it means. And he goes on in a more elaborate way to a midrash about what it means to have the tablets inscribed. And our heart is like the tablet where the nekuda kedosha occurs, the holy spark. And as we were learning this teaching and studying it, I was thinking a lot about that all of us here, whether for 40 years or for 5 years or for 10 years or me for 30 years, have really had the great privilege of touching and witnessing Roly's Nekudat Kedosha, his holy spark. When you're a rabbi and standing in front of a community for so many years, year after year, in some way, we all, although never completely, are exposed to the holy spark of a person, of a leader, of someone who has given so much. And when I think about the rabbis that I've experienced from my childhood to my adult life, colleagues, teachers, friends who are rabbis, there is something particularly unique about Roly's Nikuda, his holy spark, which is very centered, I think. When I think about this teaching, it's very much who you are. He's always attached or searching to be attached to God's spark. Many rabbis function as CEOs or heads of institutions, but not all are continually searching to be engraved with God's signature. And that, I would say, has been, in many ways, the signature of your rabbinate, which is to have faith and search for it, and to, in all the muck of existence, all the hardships of what community goes through, and your own life, that you continually are looking for that inscription over and over again. So we thought this morning that we would just take a little time to honor that, and to ask Roly a little bit about what has allowed him to do that, what has been the spark that has kept you going for all these 40 years, really beginning in this community when there were very few people here, and now look what it's become, much due to your attachment, your leadership, your faith, your soul, the nata b'tochecha, what has been implanted in you.
Thank you so much. That's very generous and kind. So, some of the things that I have learned that have kept my spark going. First and foremost, I think Hasidic teaching that I learned when I was much, much younger, and then was confirmed a number of years ago when we started studying the Netivot Shalom, this great Hasidic Rebbe who lived in Jerusalem, died just a few years ago. And the Netivot Shalom explains a verse in the book of Deuteronomy, which we have cited many, many times, because for me, I think also for you, and for many of us, it has been a North Star. It's been a spiritual compass. In Hebrew, we would say our Mizrach, by which we orient ourselves. And that's his reading of the verse, Ve'ata Yisrael, ma Adonai Elohecha shoel me'imach. And now, O Israel, and it's now said in the singular, what does Adonai your God ask of you? And he says, Imach daika, of you in particular. Not of you as a collective, you, each person in particular. What is it that God asks of me? And that's a question that I've tried to pose myself from time to time, and I think also I have attempted to teach or to ask us, for each person to pose themselves that question. What is it? What is your service? What are you here for? And then to dedicate yourself to that service with as much of your soul and your body and your strength as you can. And this question begins with, actually the verse begins with ve'ata, with ayin. Ve'ata with ayin means a now. And so it's a question that has to be asked all the time, because God is not asking me or us or any of us to do today what God asked us to do yesterday or the day before or the year before. And so searching once is not enough. And so that's one of the things that has kept me going, is to ask that question again and again and again. And sometimes I'm lazy, so I rely on old answers and it doesn't work.
What would you say has been your particular service as a rabbi?
Well, there are many, many aspects of my service as a rabbi, but I think mostly it's holding these questions in front of us. It's been mediating the tradition, finding and mining the tradition to keep that question in front of us, and to enable each one of us to find the answers within ourselves, but also look ourselves in the mirror of the tradition and look ourselves in the mirror of the Torah and all its interpretations and all the generations of teachers who have taught Torah, and find ourselves reflected in there and find the answers about what is it that God wants me to do in this world. And I would not have been able to do this had I had not had incredible teachers. Sorry. First and foremost, my teacher, Marshall. Who opened for me so many doors in my mind, in my heart. He showed me what it means to be a rabbi. He showed me the teaching of his teacher, Abraham Joshua Heschel, became my Rebbe too, although I never met him, but I met him when I was 6 years old, because Marsha would never stop talking about him and translating him into Spanish so that people could have access in Argentina and other parts in Latin America to his teachings. And so I have tremendous gratitude for him, for Heschel, for other teachers that I've had who have opened my mind and my heart. Rabbi Zalman, Rabbi Art Green, Rabbi Rachel Cowan, the writings of Aviva Zonberg, all of them and so many more have opened me. So I believe that everybody should have teachers. Now, today, everybody with an iPhone and Google, you can be an expert in anything you want, and it doesn't work that way. It's important to attach oneself to teachers who will show us the way, people who have something deep to say, and cling to them and study them. And so that's one of the things that have also kept me going, is to try to figure out, to go always a little deeper. I know that sometimes, like everybody else, I'm lazy. I don't want to do the work. But the only way spiritual life works is by doing the work and by trying to be and go as much in depth as you can. There are no shortcuts. And I think in this community, I think this is one of the miracles of this community, and what I'm so grateful for is that I've been in the company of people who have wanted to do the work and that have gone with it and that have not settled for shortcuts. Look what prayer is in this community. There's no other place that has the depth and the beauty of prayer like we have here. And that's because people come into this with devotion, seriousness, with intention. And that's, I think, what we have cultivated here. It's one of the things that has, for sure, kept me going, is the ability to pray together in community here. It has lifted me up, it has comforted me, it has strengthened me. And it's one of my grandson disagrees. We'll talk about it in a few years. The other thing I want to say is what has kept me going and has strengthened me is the work in Chevruta. I started here with Marshall, and I was his student. He was my rabbi when I was a child. I grew up under his leadership, but he treated me with so much kavod as a peer. I was young, coming out of the seminary. I didn't know much. And he treated me with such kavod and as a colleague. And I never wanted, after his untimely death, to do this on my own. And so I was blessed to have Chevruta, to have partners, to have Marcelo, to have you, to have Becca, to discuss, to have different opinions, to bring different perspectives to the table, to wrestle with the tradition. And so that's another thing that I think we have to continue here, is the work in Chevruta, to find ourselves partners with whom to talk and to discuss and to debate and to study and to do our spiritual work. So those are some of the things. And of course, having had also the honor of having students in the fellowship, 34 or so, and Joe is then sitting right here. And that's also been a tremendous privilege to be able to pass on and to receive at the same time from all these amazing fellows.
When you joined with Marshall in 1986, the community was significantly smaller than it is right now. It was a different point in, obviously, the time in our country. On the Upper West Side, it was a really different place. And the community has gone through a lot of ups and downs. BJ was on the front page of the New York Times in the 90s because of the incredible leadership and the services and the singles scene, many of whom now have kids who they married and then had kids, and now those kids are in their 20s, if not in their 30s. And then things changed, and it was a harder time in the life of the community. So 40 years isn't always living at the same madriga, living at the same level. And what do you think has given you the faith to kind of ride the wave, both in BJ community? Also, we've gone through hard times around unrest around Israel, things like that. Like, how do you move through those moments, and what has given you the faith and the strength to endure when things are not so easy?
Yes, there have been many times when it has not been easy. And that's many ways the paradox or the tension that is inherent in being a spiritual leader and being a rabbi, is that you are here to support people and comfort people and listen to people, and at the same time you're here to lead. And sometimes these two main functions, the pastor, the leader, sometimes we have to amplify the voice of the prophets, remind ourselves of the values that we have to put before us. And sometimes those things come into conflict. And I've tried as best as possible to navigate that tension, and it has not always been successful, not always been easy. Sometimes I've tried to lead from ahead, sometimes from within. I never wanted to lead from behind. And sometimes I know I've gone too far, and I turned around, there was nobody around, so I said, I realized at some point, instead of pointing the finger, maybe we as spiritual leaders didn't do such a good job in trying to bring people along. And sometimes one loses patience to wait for everybody to decide to come along, and so sometimes you're a little bit more strident, and that's the struggle.
You can be strident? I didn't know.
Not as much as my teacher. But it's inherent. There's no escape to that. And I've tried to center myself and root myself in the values I believe are what God desires of us or expects of us and what the Torah teaches. And I am not infallible and I don't have the last word, but my role is to read Torah and to interpret it and to choose and to select which are the sections in Torah that I feel are most relevant for us and for our times and for this place. And I'm not going to give up on that. I'm not going to back up from every human being is created in God's image. And that has consequences and implications that we often don't like. But that's what the Torah demands.
The last question. Is that good? I remember when we celebrated your 25 years, that the pasuk that I thought about you was, I don't know if you remember this, V'ani tefilati lecha Adonai et ratzon. And I am a prayer for you, God, at this time, et ratzon, time of
favor, it's called.
Favor, or will, or because I think many of us, I don't think there's one person here, whether you've been here for a year or whether you've been here for 40 years, who, if I think of Roly's particular service, one of the elements, service of God, is around tefillah, is around prayer. There's no one who takes the commitment, the discipline of tefillah more seriously. There's no one who is not searching, who is not demanding in that way, and also is desirous to be a guide in the journey of tefillah, which is we're all the benefactors. We have the zechut, really, the merit, the privilege to be in your kahal. I consider myself in your kahal. And part of, I would say the dominant reason, of course, in partnership with Ari and Marcelo, who came before, and Becca now, and our beautiful musicians, have you dreamed of the tefillah that we have. You midwife this tefillah. You've been, and I, in a time such as this, where the favor doesn't seem to be so strong moving in our direction, I just, and also as you anticipate.
Moving on.
What?
Moving on.
Moving on. I just wonder what's the prayer that you have right now?
So the prayer I have is to keep praying. And perhaps we haven't gone deep enough yet. You know, there's this beautiful story that Heschel tells in his book, Quest for God. And he says, you know, there's a town where all the clocks of the people stopped working over time. There was the watchmaker who lived in the town had died, and one by one all the watches started malfunctioning. There was no one to repair them. And so people started winding their watches. And then later on, years later, a new watchmaker came to the town. And all the people brought their watches to them. And they were all broken. He couldn't repair them except for the watch of this person, who, in spite of the fact that their watch was broken, they kept winding it day after day, month after month, year after year. And that was the watch that could be repaired. And Heschel applies this parable to prayer. Sometimes we don't feel our prayer is broken, our world is broken, but we have to keep trying and trying, because somewhere in the depths of the heart and in the connection with the divine, somewhere is the answer to turn ourselves and the world around. I'm a person of faith, and I'm a person of prayer. And so this is my place. My place is in the words, in Jewish prayer, in the words of the Machzor, in the words of the Siddur, and searching in there until something clicks in us and in the divine also. Something awakens. And then the world can turn and move to a better place. So let's keep praying, and let's keep the fire of this community and the devotion alive in body and soul. And that's what I see, and that's what I pray for, and that's what I hope for all of us, for the future of this 200-year community. 200 years. May there be many 100 years more of growth and devotion and prayer and love and mitzvot.
Amen.